Hey YouTube, it's Eric. This video is gonna be pretty quick. I'm just gonna be covering something that a lot of people I don't think are aware of, and that's that the country or the corporate Canada is in reality a corporation governed under maritime admiralty law, and that's why Canada and this various cities in Canada file comprehensive annual financial reports. Like I've done video on this. Like I lived I'm in school now in St. Catharines, but I used to live in London, Ontario, and in the London, Ontario comprehensive annual financial report, on every single page on the top of the report, it says the Corporation of London. Okay, it's not referred to the City of London, it's the Corporation of London. So Canada itself is a Roman corporation, but Canada was concentrated to the Virgin Mary in 1947 in like a big ceremony, and the ceremony was like then telegraphed or it was shown to it was filmed and shown to Pope Pius XII, and that just explains like if you're from Canada, you'll know this. Uh, Look around, like whatever city you're in. Just I've noticed this with the schools, especially. Take a look at every single new school that's been built in your community in Canada, and you'll see that over 95% of the new schools that are being built are Catholic schools. Okay, that's not a coincidence. That's because Canada has been concentrated to the Virgin Mary. Okay, here's the headline right here. Or this is from the CatholicRegister.org. You see, 70 years ago, Canada was concentrated to the Virgin Mary during the Marian Congress, and this was the big Catholic Congress they had in Ottawa. You see, 1,000 jams Ottawa's Lansdowne Park for the concentration of Canada to the Immaculate Heart of Mary on June 22nd, 1947. Yeah. I linked this in the description. This was like a little documentary. This is in reality it's a propaganda piece put out by the Vatican, but it's good. It's kind of interesting to see what was going on the ground during this Catholic festival that sold out Canada to the church. Um, that's why I covered this in my Lelouch, Saskatchewan video. But that's why, like right now, the Canadian Medal of Honor medals have the Roman Reef right on them. Okay, just a mockery. Okay. Here's like looks like that's a statue of the Virgin Mary during this Congress. Okay. Here are all the cardinals speaking at the podium here. Okay, but I'm gonna just read this quick. I'm gonna see if anyone's in the chat. And this way, our current president, Justin Trudeau, was Jesuit educated at the Jean Brebeuf School, and that's why he went to see Jesuit Pope Francis at the Vatican. And the Black Pope, Arturo Sosa, toured Canada about 4 months ago. And actually, the Canadian, and I covered this too in the video, the two Jesuit provinces in Canada, the province of the East and the West, are merging together now into one Jesuit bloc that's going to control Canada. um, oh, absolutely, yeah. Canada's already been like completely, yeah, we've already been like neutered in that sense with gun control. Like it's very hard to get a gun here. Um, and like there's some I don't know police state measures like are coming down the pipe. Like there are cameras going up everywhere. I've even noticed like when you go on a bus, it's probably the same in America, but when you go on like a public bus in Canada, there's like 4 cameras on the bus. You know what I mean? That are eyeing you down. Just stuff like that. Even like some stupid stuff like in London, Ontario, there are these new red light cameras where if you speed through a red light now, there's like a photograph that's taken of your license plate and you're billed like $200. And the city has made thousands of dollars, like hundreds of thousands, up probably up to millions now on that. Like that's just like a Ponzi scheme. But you see here, Ottawa. 70 years ago, Ottawa, a sleepy government town dominated by the logging industry, had never seen anything like the 1947 Marian Congress. And guys, Canada is a corporation. They file comprehensive annual financial reports. Hosted by the Archdiocese of Ottawa. And I'll go through one of the Canadian Archdiocese's financial reports. I guarantee they have billions of dollars in their assets. Like for instance, the Archdiocese of Boston had over 1.6 billion in the report that they disclosed. The Catholic Church is notorious for not disclosing the full amount even on their comprehensive annual financial reports. Okay. But you see here, so this was like a pilgrimage that took place in Ottawa. The Marian Congress drew an estimated 200,000 pilgrims from June 17th to June 22nd. News reports from the time say the city doubled in size that week. That is Ottawa. Quote, in its day, the Congress was the largest religious conference in North America, with thousands of visitors coming from all parts of North America to witness this week of prayer. end quote, said Archbishop Terence Pendergrast. And Archbishop Terence Pendergrast was Jesuit educated at the University of Regis, which is a Jesuit college at the University of Toronto. That's why like one of the Jesuits head office or one of the Jesuit offices is on Queen Street in Toronto. Yeah. We see a quote. This is a quote from Archbishop Terence Pendergrast. I'll show you a picture of him. He's like one of the big players in Canada right now. Its purpose, that is the 1947 Marian Congress that consecrated the Virgin Canada to the Virgin Mary. Its purpose, besides celebrating the centenary of the Archdiocese of Ottawa, was to pray for the lasting peace in the world. Really, the same Pope Pius XII that completely enabled Hitler to come to power, that worked with Pope Pius XI to enable Mussolini to come to power. The same Pius XII that enabled Ante Pavlich to come to power, who actually courted Ante Pavlich while he was slaughtering hundreds of thousands in Croatia. Really, that Pope Pius XII is a messenger of peace. Okay. But you see here, what's the message of Our Lady Fatima 100 years ago? A message needed even more today, he said. So the message of Our Lady Fatima is needed even more today. This is Archbishop Terence Pendergrass. I'm just going to show you this Archbishop of Ottawa here. He's the current Archbishop. Actually, is he a SJ? Yeah, Thomas Terence Pendergrass. Yeah, he's a full-out Jesuit priest. Thomas Terence Pendergrass, SJ. Yeah, he's a Jesuit. Yeah, he went to Fordham too. Yeah, he's been to multiple Jesuit Loyola High School. Okay, so this full-on Jesuit priest here is saying that Canada needs the message of the Fatima, the Virgin Mary, right now. Oh, okay, so you just see that, and Paul Ryan actually in the United States said that America needs Catholicism. So you see that the Catholic Church diplomatic activities work no matter what whatever foreign country, aka corporation, that they're operating in. Okay, going back here to the article. For 6 days, 6 days and nights, 24 hours a day, priests celebrated mass. That says at the Marian Congress, beginning a new mass every half hour. 100 priests were available to hear confessions until 3 a.m. and found the 15 confessionals built at Lansdowne Park were not enough. The Congress's crowning act, according to Pope Pius XII, was the consecration of the Dominion of Canada. You see that guy, the Dominion, that's a legal term, okay? According to Pope Pius XII, was the concentration of the Dominion of Canada to the Immaculate Heart of Mary on June 22nd, with the consecration prayers read in French and English by federal cabinet ministers, the Catholics, Louis Saint Laurent and James J. McCann. And I'm going to show you something on Louis Saint Laurent. Louis Saint Laurent became the Prime Minister of Canada right after this concentration in 1948, and he was a devout Roman Catholic. Okay. And here's you got a James J. McCann baseball field even. So here's the other Canadian politician that was with Catholic Louis Saint Laurent. Okay. See here. Took a took a personal interest. He helped organize the CBC too. This James Joseph McCann, along with actually I covered in a video I forget the guy's name. The previous CEO of the CBC was Jesuit educated. Um, So this is a quote here: "Obtain for the Holy Church of God peace and complete freedom. Stay the rising flood of modern paganism, and kickle in the faithful the love of purity, the practice of Christian virtues, and apostolic zeal, so that the servants of God may increase in holiness and number." Read a portion of the concentration text drafted by the Pope. Okay, that's just hilarious. So now he's fear warning about paganism, which is so ironic, because the Catholic Church is really the just externalized paganism. They completely mutilated the pagan doctrines, and they practice paganism themselves, and then they outwardly condemn it, just like how they outwardly condemn Freemasonry. When the motto of the 32nd degree of the Scottish Rite Masonry is "Ad Morgium El Gloriam," the motto of the Jesuits. Like, yeah, so like, it's just a mockery. Like you had the whole Jesuits involved with the P2 Masonic Lodge with the Michelle Sindona, Roberto Calvi, Robert Marcinicus, Banco Ambrosiano, Institute of Religious Work scandal in the 80s. To just prove that the Vatican and the Jesuits were working with Freemasonry, Michelle Sindona, a P2 Mason, was educated by Jesuits at Messina University. So you just see how just like how they outwardly condemned Bolshevism and communism, when Karl Marx and Joseph Stalin were both educated by Jesuits. Okay, Joseph Stalin even contemplated entering the Jesuit priesthood, and he was educated at the same Jesuit seminary as the Archbishop of Moscow, Cardinal Agnian. Okay, this is just what the popes do. But in 1947, Pope Pius XII joined the celebration by a radio address on June 19th that was broadcast to the homes throughout the country, that is Canada, as well as on loudspeakers to the overflow crowd who could not get to the quote Coliseum, the sports field for the larger events. Cardinal James McGeehan of Toronto, who served as the papal legate, was one of the 9 cardinals who each processed wearing a cappa magna, the long red cape meant to signify their willingness to shed their blood for their faith. This is, guys, have you read the Jesuit oath? Look what they'll do in their blood oath. The Jesuits will do absolutely whatever it takes that ends justify the means. They say in their blood oath that when they're doing their blood oath, actually, they hold a dagger to their heart. Okay. In their blood oath, they say that you will like smash the heads of babies against the walls. You will kill any man or woman, regardless of their class, if instructed to do so. You cannot hesitate. You cannot question the order to do so. Okay, and you see here the Catholic Church, the bishops. I don't want to like video go on too long, but like read the full Jesuit oath. That's just like a tiny brief summary. You'll see that they will do absolutely whatever it takes to get their agenda uh, done, to get their agenda to complete the agenda. The ends justify the means. We see here the long red capes worn by the cardinals, meant to signify the willingness to shed the blood for the faith. Okay, I'm just going to show you a picture of this guy here. This cardinal was very active at the Marian Congress. I got to close some of my tabs, Johnny. Uh, Actually, here's I'm surprised my computer hasn't crashed. I bought my computer for like 400 bucks like 6 years ago. But here's like a little patch that was named after this Cardinal McGeehan. In this little documentary I linked here, you can see here the black robe or the red robes that the cardinals are wearing that symbolizes their willingness to shed blood for the Catholic Church. Yeah. You see here, Cardinal Pierre Marie Guerlier, Archbishop of Lyon and Primate of the Gauls, described the Marian Congress as quote a marvel. Okay, and guys, just notice like if you live in Canada and you're watching this video, notice how every single community in Canada, all the new schools in that community are Roman Catholic. I shit you not. In London, Ontario, for example, the last 8 schools that have been built in London, Ontario, are all Catholic schools, and every single public school in London is over 60 years old. Yeah. But so it's right there, guys. Canada was concentrated to the Virgin Mary, and this coincidentally, so the Prime Minister when this happened was William Lyon Mackenzie. This happened in the last year of his office. I believe he was a Roman Catholic. I think it's let me see here. I believe he was Catholic, or he said he was Presbyterianism. Okay, he was in the Kappa Alpha Society. You can find information out there that William Lyon Mackenzie was Catholic, but the key here, though, is that the president right after, or the prime minister right after this concentration, Louis Saint Laurent, was openly Catholic. Okay, Louis Saint Laurent, uh, you see here, attended the seminary Saint Charles Borromeo, Roman Catholic seminary. Okay, grew up Irish, Canadian, Irish Catholic. Okay, and actually, here's a quotes from where was this here? I made these quotes in my video on the Vatican PSYOP up in California. Okay, and so this is from Catholic Imperialism and World Freedom by Avram Manhattan. So this is the prime minister that came in right after the concentration of the Virgin Mary. In Canada, the prime minister Louis Saint Laurent became the main instrument for defeating a bill advocating divorce in Quebec. The Catholic Church doesn't believe in divorce. In the Prosper for amending the Canadian Constitution to suit Catholic demands, as well as Catholic Saint Laurent forced Protestants to observe Catholic holidays by issuing bylaws requiring them to close their shops. In Canada, about 42% of the population are Catholic. Catholics, therefore, are still in the minority, and consequently, persecution by them is not possible. But that is coming to an end as the Catholics do slowly become a majority, and the vice grip of the Jesuits and the Catholic Church continues to tighten in Ottawa. Even so, Catholics do not hesitate to show their cloven hooves not only by burning Protestant literature, but by other less significant deeds. Some of these, no matter how superficially isolated, portend more than anything else what lies in store for Canadian democracy should Canada become Catholic. Our current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, Roman Catholic, Jesuit educated at Jean Brebeuf. You can see a picture of Jesuit educated Justin Trudeau with his Jesuit educated father with Pope John Paul II. Justin Trudeau is meeting Pope John Paul II when he's only like 8 years old. But here's a tip: Canadian Catholic Canadians pressed their government to disassociate the Canadian national anthem with the English. The reason its source was Protestant in content and spirit. Uh, He's here. Decades went by and nothing happened. No sooner, however, than Canada had a Catholic Prime Minister, Catholic demands were satisfied, and Premier Saint Laurent acceded to them. This was not all. In 1952, the devout Catholic Saint Laurent proposed to displace the word Dominion as a. And guys, the Dominion of Canada was given to the Virgin Mary in 1947, as I read earlier, as a policy designed to quote shake off the British Protestant connections end quote. In those parts of Canada where Catholics are in the majority, Protestants can be openly persecuted under the flimsiest of pretexts. Example, in 1950, 31 Baptists were arrested and sent to jail in Val-d'Or, Quebec, to charge obstruction of a traffic while holding a street service. The same tactics were used in Canada when the Catholic Premier Saint Laurent went into power. During his stay in office, two significant moves were made in that direction. The amendment of the Canadian Constitution, and that was in September 1950, especially in the field of jurisdiction, and the proposed appointment of the Canadian ambassador to the Vatican. The proposed amendment of the Canadian Constitution was particularly significant for American Protestants insofar as for decades past, Canadian Catholics had claimed that canon law should take precedent over civil law, namely that Catholic principles, particularly in the matter of moral issues, legalization of marriage, sex education, contraception, and the like, should replace a constitution based on Protestant tenets. That's just some of the intrigues of what Catholic Prime Minister Saint Laurent was doing after the Canada was concentrated to the Virgin Mary. And you guys should look into this Project Surname here. This, as I mentioned earlier, Canada was a corporation, and as the Canadian corporation was trying to identify and tag all of its subjects, what Project Surname was is what Canadian government officials and military men went up into the Inuit and essentially barcoded all of these Inuits. Okay, because if you understand Inuit names, Inuits don't have Western names. Like I'm Eric Bowman, they don't have a first and a last name. Okay, so the legal birth certificate system requires you to have a first name and a surname, which the Inuits didn't have. So the Canadian government went up there into the Inuit and essentially barcoded all these people and gave them legal names so that they could be uh, ledgered into the system. And that's why the term insinuar is to be legally deposited into uh, a legal proceeding, and that's what happened in Project Surname. Interestingly, like that's the whole legal fiction idea is the philosophy of the charlatan Nazi philosopher Martin Heidegger, who was also coincidentally Jesuit educated at the Freiburg Seminary and contemplated on entering the priesthood. But yeah, Martin Heidegger was all about how like, oh, you're just thrown and deposited into the world, which is actually what the drafting of the birth certificate is. It's an act of Roman dissimulation. There's actually a legal term for it is captus. There's let me see here, captus. Yeah, I think this is the legal term here. Um, yeah, captus domino. Okay, in the Roman law, referring to distinguishing either in whole part of a person's former status and legal capacity. So this is changing your legal capacity to a person by the drafting of a birth certificate. But I just wanted to mention the country of Canada was concentrated to the Virgin Mary. And just look at this. This was literally like a Roman pilgrimage. This is just like the pilgrimages of like Boniface the Eighth back in the 1300s. Well, yeah, you know what, Johnny Avril Manhattan wrote that in 1952. So since then, Catholics I think now actually are a majority in Canada because it's overwhelming. So many Catholics are in the government. Um, I've done previous videos on it. I don't have the list. I've gone through lists. I've covered like 6 or 7 Canadian senators outwardly went to Jesuit schools. Every single Canadian prime minister since like Louis Saint Laurent has like gone to see the Pope. You know, Harper went to see the Pope. Paul Martin went to see the Pope. Trudeau went to see the Pope. Brian Mulroney got honorary degrees from Jesuit Boston College and St. Francis Xavier. And Brian Mulrooney is now on the board of directors at Blackstone Group, one of the world's largest private equity firms, which has over 20 Jesuit-educated alums on the board and through their executive structure. One big one in particular, Joseph Beretta, the head of global equity at Blackstone, is on the Georgetown University Board of Directors, educated at Georgetown, and the former Canadian Prime Minister is on the board at Blackstone. Um, well, you know what? Like in Canada too, like I don't know if this is a factor too, but Canada and the U.S. I've noticed population. I don't know if you. I don't know if you would take on this, Johnny. But I've noticed like population growth in Canada and the US is going down. Like for example, like the average woman now in Canada and the US is not even having like one kid. So countries like Canada and the US are now becoming dependent on immigration to keep the population increasing. And obviously our Catholic controlled governments are completely favoring Roman Catholic immigrants to come into our country, and they're more than happy to have us relying on uh, bringing in Roman Catholics to keep the population increasing. Oh, oh yeah, Johnny. Yeah, I've done. Actually, I don't know if you've seen it. I did a video, for instance, on the. I went through the entire list of the USA ambassadors that went to the Georgetown School of Foreign Service, and literally the video was over an hour long of me going through the list. There had to be over 55 U.S. ambassadors that have gone to Georgetown. Yeah, that one school is incredible. Like there's like 55 ambassadors that went to Georgetown, like 40 governors throughout history, multiple Supreme Court justices. Like I found it interesting that Skull and Bones, Howard Taft, who Theodore Roosevelt sent to the Vatican as a personal representative, nominated Jesuit Georgetown educated Edward Douglas White to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1910. People are sleeping on Georgetown. And actually, Johnny, I don't know if you've seen this. Like Jay Z actually spoke at Georgetown, or yeah, Jay Z spoke at Georgetown last year. So did Nas, and Georgetown's now offering a course, a sociology course on Jay Z, which I thought was kind of interesting and got a kick out of. I thought that was just kind of gutless on his part because even like 3 years ago, Georgetown University admitted to selling like 400 black slaves in 1938, 1838. Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, yeah, Johnny. I've heard you say that like Donald Trump will build the wall fast as Barack Obama closed Guantanamo, and that's the perfect way to say it. That wall is never going to be built. And just Johnny, think of this thought. Imagine if the people coming into America from Mexico were Christian Protestants. There would literally be an electric fence from California to Brownsville, Texas. There would be thousands of helicopters patrolling that border. There would be snipers. There would be attack dogs. There would be Humvees lined up all across the border. Like if there was a if there were Protestants coming into the U.S. instead of Catholics, like that whole border would have been completely militarily secured 40 years ago. But the fact that they are Catholics coming in is why they're leaving the border wide open. But yeah, I think I'm gonna call it here though. So I just wanted to cover Canada was concentrated to the Virgin Mary, and actually I'll show you. See if I can get some pictures of the Marian Congress. Here's the yeah. I could see yeah it was a surface psyop because they didn't admit that how like the Jesuits were literally controlling the entire slave trade. They just did. There was like a little small admission that hey, oh, we just sold a little bit of slaves here. They didn't tell you the whole picture that like Pope Pius VI like had personal slaves, and that the Jesuits were running the slave trade out of Lisbon, Portugal, and then they were running it out of England through the um, Royal African Company. They're obviously not going to go into depth with how the Roman Catholics controlled the slave trade. But here's some pictures of this pilgrimage in Ottawa here that took place. Um, there's some pictures there. This was literally like a pilgrimage of like 1300, like Boniface the Eighth, and like the holy door of Pope Alexander the Sixth. And it's important to know Pope Alexander the Sixth, in his papal bull Inter Carrera, He actually, well, Christopher Columbus sailed to the Americas as like as a quote a son of the Catholic Church. So when Christopher Columbus was sailing to America, he was sailing for Catholic Spanish imperialism in 1493, and that's why. So after Intercarrera, there was a little bit of an aristocratic feud between Spain and Portugal, and that's when the Treaty of Tordesillas was signed in 1492. Or I'll show you that. This is just kind of how, and like this preceded the creation of America. But you see here, the creation of America was just incorporating America into like the papal legal dominion structure here. But you see here, Spain was given the entire world east of this line here, and Portugal was given the entire world, or Portugal was given the entire world east of this line. Spain was given the entire world west of this line. That was the Treaty of Tordesillas. Yeah, Johnny, I'll message you about that. George, also, I talked to George a couple days ago, and he mentioned to me that you wanted to do it Wednesday at 10 a.m. So I'll get to you back on that. Yeah, Taft wasn't an open Catholic, but his appoint. Yeah, I just see your comment about Taft. Taft, he wasn't an open Catholic, but like he appointed Jesuit trained people into his administration. Um, General Mark Clark, I don't think he was openly Catholic, but I know General Mark Clark was personally friends with Pope Pius XII, and he was in the Vatican Order of Saint Lazarus and Saint Martinus. And General Mark Clark was like very close with, I know, with the Allen Dulles, the whole Dulles family. I read that. I read a There's a declassified CIA letter that Allen Dulles wrote to Herbert Hoover, where he's talking about like our great friend General Mark Clark. Um, Yeah, I think Columbus was a Kelowna or some family. Even Manly Hall mentions that Columbus wasn't his real name. But I think the fact that I think he did sail on behalf of Alexander the Sixth. I think that just explains so much of what has taken place uh, post 1494 on the South American and North American continent, especially South America, because South America has been controlled by the Jesuits and the Catholic Church since 1600, especially when they put up the Paraguay. It started with like the Paraguay reductions and grew out from there. But yeah, that's all for this one, guys. Peace and love, and Namnas. Take care.